yelling and screaming, at least 3 days a week. That's not the best childhood a kid could have. I was always wondering why my parents didn't divorce, because it was unbearable for me, and I couldn't help but think, how would it be to live with someone you just can't stand? I had a good relationship with both of them, my mom and my dad, but they never got along, from my first memories of them. When I asked my mom why we couldn't move back to our old apartment where we lived when I was a little kid, my mom told me we couldn't afford it because my dad was the breadwinner and she didn't have any income. Until the day my mom found my dad in the bedroom with her friend. I had never seen my mom crying until that day because I never thought she cared about my dad in that way. Something seemed odd. However, I didn't witness the scene since I was in school. She picked me up from school with all of my things from our house and we never returned back home. My mom decided we will go to our old apartment that I mentioned earlier. When we arrived at our new home, I started unpacking my clothes immediately and putting them in my new closet, trying not to stress my mother any further. Although she wasn't satisfied with the way I folded my shirts, I could see she appreciated the effort. Since we hadn't lived there for a long time, the house was dusty when we arrived, but in the bottom drawer I found some pink baby clothes. When I went to the living room to ask my mom about it, she immediately started crying and took them from my hands, going straight to her room. She just needs a good rest, I thought. Since I couldn't fall asleep easily in my bed, I would hear her crying every night, but in a very strange way. She seemed to be struggling to accept the fact that my dad had found another woman, I thought. She didn't even stop crying for a couple of weeks now, but one day, when we were eating breakfast together, I asked her about her crying at night and if I could help her in some way. But she said she hadn't cried since the day we left and she didn't care about my dad at all. Maybe she was trying to make it easier for herself, I guessed. But then, one night I couldn't take it anymore. I was about to go straight to her room to ask if she wanted to talk or something. But then I realized that the crying wasn't coming from her room. It was coming from the living room. And it didn't sound like my mom at all. As I was getting closer, I saw a silhouette of a little girl crying. When she looked at me, she said, "I just wanted to catch that bird. I didn't do it on purpose." I was frightened, and I started screaming for my mom and ran towards her bedroom. But before I managed to open the door, my mom woke up and asked me what was wrong. I said there was a little girl. My mom didn't say a word about it. Instead, she sat down, hugged me, and started crying. What I discovered was even scarier. My mom explained to me that I wasn't their first child. She and my dad had a little girl before I was born, and she had always been obsessed with birds. She would often feed the birds on the balcony, but either mom or dad would be always with her since the apartment is on the sixth floor. But one day their balcony door was left unlocked, and my little sister leaned over the fence to feed the birds and fell on the ground. My parents never got along after that. She blamed him for leaving the door open, and he blamed her. They decided to have another child and tried to forget about this. On the other hand, they couldn't stay in that apartment because of the memories of how their little girl had lost her life. They decided to find a new house in the countryside for a cheap price since they were both working and houses were not expensive at that time. Selling wasn't an option as well since we lived in a small town and the news about what happened in our apartment had spread. However, they couldn't even rent it for long because every tenant complained about the same noises I heard and didn't last long in it. Days passed and I started sleeping again, but whenever I heard my little sister crying, I couldn't just leave her alone. I would get out of my bed to comfort my little sister as a good big brother would do. Sometimes even my mom would join us and we would all hang out together, talking about birds. Only my dad was missing, so we would be complete. My mom told me that we should never talk about our nighttime gatherings with anyone. Do you think I have lost my mind? Or she is really there with me?